The lights on Station Omega 7 flickered red as emergency sirens wailed through every corridor. People ran in panic, some screaming, others frozen in terror as they watched the monitors scattered throughout the massive space station. On every single screen, the same horrifying scene played over and over again. A monster was loose. The Karathax stood 12 feet tall, its body covered in thick black armor that looked like it had been carved from obsidian. 6 legs supported its massive frame, each one ending in claws that could punch through solid metal. Its head was something out of humanity's worst nightmares, oversized mandibles that opened wide enough to swallow a grown person whole, multiple eyes that glowed with an eerie intelligence, and serrated edges on every surface that could cut and tear. In the emergency council chamber, Commander Esikatar stood frozen as he watched the security footage. His 4 arms hung limply at his sides, his blue-gray skin several shades paler than usual. The Valorian had commanded this station for 15 years. He'd seen riots, mechanical failures, even hostile boarding attempts. But nothing had prepared him for this. The footage showed the creature's rampage through Sector D. 3 containment teams had tried to stop it. 3 teams of the galaxy's best warriors. The first team had been Thronic soldiers. Massive beings who stood 8 feet tall, their bodies naturally armored with bone plates thick enough to stop most conventional weapons. The Karathax had torn through them in under 2 minutes. The video showed it grabbing a Thronix warrior, lifting the struggling soldier like a toy, and biting clean through the armor that was supposed to be impenetrable. The second team had been different. The Mindari were telepaths, peaceful beings who could usually calm any creature through mental connection. They'd approached the Karathax with confidence, their head tendrils glowing as they reached out with their minds. The creature had paused for just a moment. Then it screamed, a sound so terrible that the audio sensors had partially failed trying to record it. The Mindari had collapsed, their minds shattered by whatever they'd touched inside that alien consciousness. The Karathax had consumed them while they lay helpless. The third team had been purely mechanical. Zeln 7 combat units, cyborgs with more metal than flesh, programmed specifically for containment operations. They'd unleashed plasma fire that should have melted the creature's armor. Instead, the Karathax had charged through the barrage like it was walking through rain. Its claws had torn the cyborgs apart, scattering sparking components across the floor. "Sir, we need a decision," the station's head of security said. His name was Torvin, a normally steady officer who'd served in 3 different wars. Now his voice shook as he spoke. "That thing has claimed the entire agricultural sector. 3 levels. It's treating it like a nest, like hunting grounds. We've sealed the blast doors, but they won't hold forever." Esikatar forced himself to focus. The agricultural sector was massive, a controlled ecosystem that fed the station's 17,000 residents. The Karathax had somehow understood this was the perfect territory, plenty of space, multiple levels for vertical hunting, and enough environmental complexity to satisfy its instincts. "Show me the behavioral analysis," Esikatar ordered. A hologram appeared in the center of the room. The station's artificial intelligence had been studying the creature's movements, trying to predict its patterns. What they'd discovered was almost worse than the killing itself. The Karathax wasn't just a mindless beast. It was intelligent. Terrifyingly intelligent. It learned from each encounter. After the first containment team, it had adapted its tactics. It used the environment, setting ambushes, herding its prey into kill zones. It marked territory with the remains of its victims, creating psychological warfare before the physical battle even began. "It's playing with us," one of the council members whispered. She was a Drell, a species known for their strategic minds. Even she looked shaken. "It knows we're watching. It knows we're afraid." "How long until it breaches the containment doors?" Esikatar asked. Torvin checked his datapad, his hands trembling slightly. 6 hours. Maybe 7 if we're lucky. After that, it reaches the residential zones. Silence fell over the council chamber. 17,000 people lived on this station. Families, children, elderly. All of them would be trapped with a creature that had already proven it could kill anything the galaxy threw at it. "We could evacuate," someone suggested weakly. "Where?" Esikatar snapped. "The nearest station is 3 days away at maximum FTL. We have maybe 6 hours. The evacuation ships can't move that many people that fast. And the moment we start mass evacuation, there'll be panic. People will die in the stampede before that thing ever reaches them." Another council member spoke up. "What about venting the sector? Open it to space, kill it with decompression?" "That could work," Torvin admitted. "But we'd need time to evacuate the adjacent sectors first. Time we don't have." Unless. He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Unless what? Sikatar demanded. Unless we give it something else to focus on. Something to keep it distracted while we evacuate the surrounding areas and set up the venting sequence. You mean bait, Sikatar said flatly. Torvin nodded. We have a human in detention block 7. Picked him up 3 days ago during anti-piracy operations. He's scheduled for execution anyway, smuggling illegal weapons, unauthorized system entry, resisting arrest. The council members looked at each other. Humans were relatively new to galactic civilization. They'd only achieved faster-than-light travel about 30 years ago. Most species considered them weak, unimpressive. Their planet was ordinary, their technology borrowed from other species, their physical capabilities laughable compared to proper warrior races. A human? One council member scoffed. That creature will tear it apart in seconds. Exactly, Ethitar said quietly, a terrible plan forming in his mind. We put the human in the nest. The Kaerthax will focus on it, an easy kill, fresh prey. That gives us the time we need to evacuate sectors E and F, seal the blast doors and vent the atmosphere. The human dies, but 17,000 others live. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of what they were proposing. They were sentencing someone to death. Using them as bait for a monster. It went against every principle the Galactic Council claimed to uphold. But the alternative was watching that monster tear through thousands of innocent people. One by one the council members voted. Each vote felt like another nail in a coffin. The decision was unanimous. Jake Cooper had been staring at the same crack in the ceiling for so long he'd started seeing patterns in it. A spider web. A river delta. Sometimes, if he squinted just right, it looked like the scar on his left arm from that deployment in Sudan. That had been a lifetime ago, back when he wore the uniform and followed orders and believed the world made some kind of sense. Now he was sitting in an alien prison cell, waiting to die for the crime of moving weapons from one star system to another. Former Marine turned gun runner. His mother would have been so proud. He'd stopped counting the days about a week ago. What was the point? The Galactic Council had already scheduled his execution. Something about unauthorized system entry, illegal arms trafficking, and resisting arrest. The last part was debatable. He'd only punched 2 guards and they'd been trying to confiscate his ship. A man had a right to defend his property, even if that man was human and the property was technically stolen. The cell was small, maybe 8 feet by 10. Gray walls. Gray floor. Gray ceiling with that one crack that kept him company. They fed him twice a day through a slot in the door. The food was nutritionally complete but tasted like cardboard mixed with synthetic protein. He'd eaten worse during his time in the Marines but not by much. The door suddenly hissed open. Jake sat up, instantly alert. It wasn't feeding time. Something was wrong. 4 guards crowded into the doorway, and every single one of them had their weapons pointed directly at his chest. The lead guard looked like something that had crawled out of Earth's prehistoric era and decided to evolve in a really weird direction. Mantis-like head, multiple limbs, covered in what looked like natural armor plating. Come with us, the guard's translator device crackled. The voice was flat, emotionless. Now, do not resist. Jake raised his hands slowly, showing he wasn't going to cause trouble. Mind telling me what's happening? I thought my execution wasn't scheduled until next week. They didn't answer. Instead they grabbed him, 2 on each arm, and hauled him out of the cell. Their grip was like steel, fingers digging into his biceps hard enough to bruise. They marched him down corridors he'd never seen before, past other cells, past storage areas, past sections of the station that looked more like laboratories than a prison. Then they shoved him into a decontamination chamber. The sprays hit him from all sides, chemical solutions that burned his skin and made his eyes water. He tried to shield his face but the guards held his arms. Scanners swept over him, invisible beams that felt like insects crawling across his skin. They stripped away everything. His jacket, the one with the hidden pocket where he'd kept emergency credits. His boots, good boots broken in over 2 years of hard use. His emergency beacon, a tiny device sewn into his collar that could have saved his life in the right situation. They left him standing in nothing but gray prison clothes and bare feet. The fabric was thin, cheap, barely warmer than paper. What the hell is going on? Jake demanded, his voice echoing in the chamber. The mantis guard clicked its mandibles together. You have been selected for special assignment. They led him to another room. This one had monitors covering the walls. Each screen showed the same thing from different angles. Jake's blood went cold as he watched. A creature. Massive. Alien. Wrong in ways that made his lizard brain scream danger. It moved through what looked like an artificial jungle and it was hunting. On one screen, it cornered something that looked like a soldier, 8 feet tall, covered in natural armor, carrying weapons that could probably level a building. The creature moved faster than something that size had any right to move. Its mandibles opened wide, wider, impossibly wide. The soldier's armor cracked like an eggshell. Another screen showed different prey. These looked more peaceful, their heads covered in weird tentacle things that glowed softly. They'd been trying to communicate with the creature, Jake realized. Trying to calm it down. The creature screamed, a sound so terrible the audio crackled and distorted. The peaceful aliens collapsed. The creature ate them while they lay there. A third screen showed robots, military grade by the look of them. They were shooting at the creature with weapons that made the air shimmer with heat. Plasma fire, Jake thought. The kind of thing that should melt through anything. The creature charged through it like it was walking through a summer rain. Metal bodies scattered across the floor, torn apart, sparking and dying. "You're looking at the Kaarthax," a new voice said. Jake recognized it from his arrest. Commander Esikatar, the station's leader. "It escaped from a research facility 3 days ago. It has killed everything we've sent against it." Jake tore his eyes away from the screens. "And you're showing me this why?" "Because we're putting you in there with it." For a moment, Jake thought he'd misheard. The translator must have glitched. But the guards were all watching him and none of them looked like they were joking. "You're insane," Jake said flatly. "You have a choice," Esikatar continued, his voice coming from speakers Jake couldn't see. "Enter the creature's nest or we execute you right now. Immediately. No trial, no appeal. In the nest, you might survive long enough for us to evacuate the surrounding sectors and kill the creature. You'll die either way, human. But one death serves a purpose. One death saves thousands of lives." Jake laughed. He couldn't help it. The sound came out harsh and bitter, echoing in the small room. "Some choice. Die now or die in 10 minutes. Choose." Jake looked back at the screens. He watched the Kaarthax move through the darkness, efficient and deadly. He watched it mark its territory with the bones of its victims. He watched it settle into what looked like a nest made from torn metal and organic matter he didn't want to identify. Every instinct he had screamed at him to refuse. To take the quick execution. A bullet, or whatever aliens used, would be faster. Cleaner. Less painful than being torn apart by that thing. But Jake had never been good at taking the easy way out. That was why he'd joined the Marines. Why he'd volunteered for the dangerous deployments. Why he'd survived situations that should have killed him. "Open the door," he said quietly. The guards marched him through more corridors. Other station residents pressed against the walls, staring at him. Some looked curious. Most looked relieved. They knew. Everyone knew. He was the sacrifice. The bait. The thing they'd throw to the monster so they could live. They reached a massive reinforced door. It looked like it belonged on a vault or a spaceship airlock. Beyond it, sensors showed 3 levels of artificial jungle. Humid air. Thick vegetation. Darkness broken only by dim emergency lighting. Somewhere in there the Kaarthax waited. The door opened with a mechanical hiss that sounded way too much like a snake's warning. Hot, wet air rushed out, carrying smells Jake couldn't identify. Earth jungle mixed with something alien, something wrong. Jake stood at the threshold. Behind him, the guards waited, weapons ready in case he tried to run. He didn't run. He stepped through. The door sealed behind him with a heavy thud that echoed through the artificial jungle. Final. Absolute. Like a coffin lid closing. In the darkness above, something shifted. Something massive. Jake heard claws scraping against metal, heard the rustle of movement through thick vegetation. The Kaarthax had detected him. New prey. Easy prey. But Jake didn't run. Running triggered the chase instinct in predators. He'd learned that during survival training, had it reinforced during a very bad night in the Philippines when he'd stumbled into territory claimed by a territorial tiger. Instead, he moved sideways into the shadows, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. His eyes adjusted to the dim light. His breathing slowed. His mind kicked into the old patterns, the ones the Marines had drilled into him until they became automatic. If this thing wanted to hunt him, fine. But Jake had been trained by the best hunters on Earth. He'd make damn sure it worked for the kill. Commander Esikatar hadn't slept in 3 days. He'd been glued to the monitors in the observation deck, watching and waiting for the inevitable. The human should have been dead within the first hour. 2 hours maximum. Every projection, every statistical model, every bit of data they had said the same thing: humans were weak, slow, fragile. Against the Kaarthax they didn't stand a chance. But Jake Cooper was still alive. How is this possible? Torvin, the security chief, muttered for probably the 20th time. His 4 eyes were locked on the main screen, watching the human move through the artificial jungle like smoke. Everything else died in hours. The Thronix lasted 90 minutes. The Mindari made it barely 20 minutes. Even the Zeln 7 units were destroyed in under an hour. On the screen, Jake moved carefully between thick vegetation, his movements deliberate and controlled. He wasn't running. Wasn't panicking. He looked like he was taking a walk through a park, except this park had a 12-foot-tall killing machine somewhere in the shadows. Dr. Vela, the station's xenobiologist, leaned forward in her seat. Her scales shimmered with excitement, a reaction her species had when observing something scientifically fascinating. Look at his pattern of movement. He's learned the Kaerthax's schedule. Watch. See how he avoids the western sector between the hours of 0600 and 1200? That's when the creature hunts most actively in that zone. Katar studied the tracking data. She was right. Jake had somehow mapped out the Kaerthax's entire routine. When it hunted. When it rested. Which areas it considered prime territory and which areas were just passage routes. He's using the territorial markers, Dr. Vela continued, her voice filled with academic wonder. The Kaerthax marks its hunting grounds with claw marks and chemical signatures. The human has figured out how to read them. He's navigating using the creature's own language. But how? Another council member asked. Humans don't have the sensory capability to detect chemical markers. Their sense of smell is notoriously weak. He's reading the claw marks, Dr. Vela explained, pointing at the screen. See? Deeper gouges mean active hunting territory. Shallow marks mean passage routes. He's adapted to use what he can perceive. Itar felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. Respect maybe. Or shame. They'd sent this human in to die, expecting him to last maybe an hour. Instead, he was surviving through pure observation and intelligence. Jake had found a spot on the second level where the vegetation grew thick enough to provide cover but thin enough that he could see approaching threats. He'd woven together vines and branches to create a shelter that blended perfectly with the environment. He slept there during the Kaerthax's active hunting periods, and moved only when the creature was resting. But what Jake had noticed went beyond just survival patterns. During his 72 hours of observation, barely sleeping, always watching, he'd seen something everyone else had missed. The Kaerthax was lonely. It wasn't just a killing machine. It built things. Jake watched it arrange bones from its prey into specific patterns, geometric designs that seemed intentional, purposeful. It would spend hours on these arrangements, adjusting and readjusting until some criteria only it understood was satisfied. And it made sounds. Not the hunting screech that had shattered the Mindari's minds. These were different. Softer. Complex clicking patterns that varied in rhythm and tone. Jake recognized it for what it was, calling. The creature was calling out into the darkness, hoping for an answer that never came. It was looking for its own kind. And it was alone. On the 4th day, Jake made a decision that should have gotten him killed. When the guards dropped his daily ration pack through the ceiling chute, he didn't tear into it like he had the previous days. Instead, he sat there looking at the protein bars and dried nutrition squares, thinking. The guards dropped these rations from a safe distance, never entering the chamber. They expected to find his body any day now. But Jake was still here, and he had an idea that was either brilliant or suicidal. Probably both. He carefully divided his rations in half. The human body could survive on less food than this for a while. He'd done it before during survival training. Then he carried half of his food to a neutral zone he'd identified. It was a clearing where the Kaerthax passed during its patrols but didn't actively hunt. A space between territories. Jake placed the food in the center of the clearing and retreated to cover. Then he waited. His heart hammered in his chest. This was insane. He was essentially inviting the creature to interact with him. Every survival instinct screamed at him to take his food and hide. But Jake had spent 3 days watching this creature. He'd seen something in its behavior that reminded him of animals back on Earth. The big predators everyone feared, wolves, bears, big cats. They were dangerous, yes, but they weren't evil. They were just trying to survive, just trying to exist in a world that often didn't make sense to them. An hour later, the Kaerthax entered the clearing. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The creature was massive this close, its black armor gleaming in the dim light. It approached the food cautiously, head swiveling, scanning for threats. It circled the protein bars 3 times. Its mandibles clicked softly, not aggressively but curiously. It was trying to understand. Was this a trap? Was something poisoned? Why would food just appear? Then it ate. The Kaarthax consumed the rations quickly, efficiently. When it finished, it paused, looking around the clearing as if trying to understand what had just happened. Then it left. On the 5th day Jake did it again. Same spot. Same amount of food. But this time he didn't hide completely. He stayed at the edge of the clearing, visible but not threatening. The Kaarthax arrived like clockwork. It saw the food. Then it saw Jake. They locked eyes. Jake's entire body tensed, ready to bolt. The creature could cross the distance between them in seconds. But he forced himself to stay still. Forced himself to breathe normally. Forced himself to remember every lesson about animal behavior he'd ever learned. Don't run. Running triggers the chase. Don't show fear. Fear smells like prey. The Kaarthax took a step toward him. Jake did something that felt completely insane. He lowered himself into a crouch, making himself smaller, less threatening. It was a submissive posture, but not a prey posture. More like acknowledgement. Recognition. The creature tilted its massive head, studying him with those multiple glowing eyes. Jake could hear its breathing, could smell something sharp and alien coming off its armor. Then the Kaarthax made a sound. Soft. A clicking that was almost gentle. Nothing like the hunting screech. It turned and walked away. It didn't attack. In the observation deck, Eftar whispered, "That's impossible." But Jake knew better. He'd worked with military dogs in the Marines. He'd watched his grandfather gentle wild horses on the ranch in Montana. He'd seen documentary footage of researchers bonding with wolves, with great apes, with creatures everyone said were too dangerous. Sometimes the most dangerous creatures weren't evil. They were just scared, alone, and misunderstood. Jake just had to prove he wasn't prey. He was something else. Something the galaxy hadn't expected. He was a friend. On day 12, everything changed in a way Jake never saw coming. He'd gotten comfortable. That was his first mistake. After nearly 2 weeks of carefully navigating the artificial jungle, learning the Kaarthax's patterns, building a fragile understanding between them, Jake had started to relax. Not completely. You never completely relaxed around a predator that could tear you in half. But enough that he'd stopped checking every handhold 3 times before trusting his weight to it. His shelter was on the upper level, tucked into a corner where thick artificial vines created a natural screen. He'd woven the vines together over several days, creating walls and a roof that blended perfectly with the environment. It wasn't home, but it was safe. Or as safe as anywhere could be when sharing space with the galaxy's deadliest predator. He'd been working on reinforcing one of the support beams. The vine he'd been using was starting to fray, and the last thing he needed was his shelter collapsing on him during the night. Jake reached up, testing his weight on a branch that looked sturdy enough. It wasn't. The branch snapped with a crack that echoed through the chamber. Jake fell, arms windmilling, trying to grab onto something, anything. 8 feet wasn't far. He jumped from higher during training exercises. But training exercises had padding. Training exercises didn't have exposed roots and metal support beams. He landed on his left side. His ankle twisted underneath him with a pop that he felt more than heard. Pain exploded up his leg, white-hot and immediate. Jake bit down hard on his tongue, tasting copper, forcing himself not to scream. Screaming was prey behavior. Screaming would bring the Kaarthax running. He sat there against the tree trunk, breathing hard through his teeth, trying to assess the damage. His ankle was already swelling, pressing against the fabric of his prison-issue pants. When he tried to flex it, fresh agony shot through the joint. Sprained for sure. Maybe broken. Either way, he wasn't walking on it. Not today. Probably not for several days. He was vulnerable. Injured. In predator territory. The Kaarthax arrived within minutes. Jake heard it before he saw it. The distinctive sound of its claws on metal, the rustle of vegetation being pushed aside by something massive. It moved with that terrifying grace, each step deliberate and controlled. When it emerged from the foliage, its mandibles were already spreading wide, its hunting posture unmistakable. This was it. This was how it ended. Jake couldn't run. Even if he wanted to, even if every instinct screamed at him to get up and move, his ankle wouldn't support him. He was sitting against the tree trunk, helpless, watching death approach on 6 legs. The ground shook with each step. The Kaarthax was 15 feet away. 10 feet. 5 feet. "Hey," Jake said softly, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "Guess you got me, huh?" The creature paused. Its massive head tilted to one side, those multiple glowing eyes studying him. Jake could see his reflection in the black armor plating. He should be terrified. Part of him was. But another part, The part that had survived firefights and survived bad decisions and survived everything life had thrown at him, that part was strangely calm. If he was going to die, he wasn't going to die silent and afraid. You know, Jake continued, talking like they were old friends having a conversation, this reminds me of home. We have forests there that look almost like this place. Real ones though. With real rain and real wind. You'd probably like it. Lots of space to run. Lots of things to hunt. His voice was calm, rhythmic. Not the high-pitched terror of prey. Not the aggressive challenge of a rival. Just talking. The way someone might talk to a scared dog or a nervous horse. The Karathax's mandibles clicked softly. Not the aggressive hunting click that had preceded every kill Jake had seen on the security footage. This was different. Softer. It was the curious sound Jake had heard the creature make late at night when it thought it was alone. When it was calling out for others of its kind that weren't there. I know what it's like, Jake said, his ankle throbbing with each heartbeat. Being alone. Being far from home. Being stuck somewhere that doesn't make sense. Everyone looking at you like you're dangerous. Like you're a monster. The Karathax took another step forward. Then it did something that made Jake's heart stop completely. It settled down. Not in a hunting crouch. Not preparing to pounce. Just sat. Its massive body lowered to the ground about 3 feet from Jake, its bulk positioned between him and the rest of the chamber. Like it was guarding him. Protecting him. In the observation deck, Commander Esikatar's 4 hands gripped the console hard enough that the metal creaked. What is that thing doing? Dr. Vela's scales were flashing rapidly, her species sign of extreme excitement or shock. That's colony behavior. Nestmate protection. The Karathax. It thinks the human is injured family. It's protecting him. That's impossible, Torvin breathed. It's a predator. It should be. It's not acting like a predator, Dr. Vela interrupted. It's acting like a colonist. Like a nestmate. Somehow that human has triggered the Karathax's social bonding instincts. Over the next week, Jake's ankle slowly healed. He couldn't put weight on it for the first 3 days, could only hobble on the 4th and 5th. And during all that time the Karathax stayed close. The creature brought him food. Not the ration packs from the guards, those still came through the ceiling chute, but portions of whatever the Karathax itself was eating. Jake tried not to think too hard about what that meat had been before it became food. The scientists in the observation deck recognized this behavior immediately. Colony feeding. The way Karathax adults fed their young or their injured nestmates. At night, the creature settled near Jake's shelter, its massive form a living barrier between him and anything that might threaten him. Not that there were any threats besides the Karathax itself, but the gesture was clear. Jake started testing boundaries carefully. On the 6th day, when his ankle could finally support his weight again, he reached out and touched the Karathax's carapace. Just a light touch, ready to pull back if the creature reacted badly. The Karathax leaned into the contact, mandibles clicking contentedly. Jake pressed his palm flat against the black armor. It was warm, warmer than he expected, with a texture like smooth stone. The creature's clicking increased, a sound almost like purring. Yeah, Jake said quietly, a small smile on his face. We're going to be okay. 4 weeks had passed since Jake Cooper walked into what everyone thought would be his tomb. 4 weeks since the Galactic Council had used him as bait, expecting his death to buy them time. Now that same council sat in emergency session again, but this time the mood was different. Uncertain. Uncomfortable. Commander Esikatar watched the live feed from the nest chamber. Jake was sitting next to the Karathax, hand resting casually on its armored carapace, like someone petting a large dog. The creature's mandibles clicked contentedly, its massive head resting on its front legs. This situation cannot continue, Council Member Drax stated, his tone making it clear he'd already made up his mind. The Karathax is still a dangerous predator. We cannot keep it contained indefinitely. Our extermination protocols are ready. We should implement them now while the creature is calm. You want to kill it? Esikatar said flatly. It has already killed dozens of our personnel. The fact that it hasn't killed the human doesn't change what it is. Esikatar was about to respond when his communication panel lit up. A message from Jake Cooper requesting to address the council. Esikatar hesitated only a moment before accepting. They owed the human that much at least. Jake's face appeared on the view screens around the chamber. He looked different than he had 4 weeks ago. Leaner, harder, but also more at peace. Behind him, clearly visible, the Karathax rested. I hear you're planning to kill it, Jake said, no preamble, no diplomatic softening. Just straight to the point. The council members shifted uncomfortably. Several wouldn't meet his eyes even through the video feed. You don't have to kill it, Jake continued. The Kaarthax isn't a monster. It's a juvenile that was taken from its home world before it finished maturing. Before it learned how to be part of a colony. It's been alone, scared, stuck in an environment it doesn't understand. Every single species that came near it tried to either kill it or cage it. Of course it fought back. What would you do? It killed our people, Drax said coldly. That cannot be ignored. And I'm not asking you to ignore it, Jake replied. I'm asking you to understand it. This creature isn't evil. It's not a killing machine. It's a social animal that was isolated and traumatized. I've spent 4 weeks with it. I've seen how it behaves when it's not being attacked. When it's not afraid. What exactly are you proposing, human? Tikatar asked. Let me take it home. Back to Vex 9. There are nature preserves there, protected areas where Kaarthax colonies live naturally. I can transport it safely. I can get it back to its own kind. The council chamber erupted. Multiple members tried to speak at once, their voices overlapping in a chaos of objections. Trust a human with our most dangerous prisoner? The creature will break free and kill him. This is absurd. Ikatar raised all 4 of his hands, calling for silence. When the chamber quieted, he looked directly at Jake's image. You're asking us to trust you with a creature that has killed trained warriors. You're a smuggler. A criminal. Why should we believe you can do this? Jake's expression didn't change. Because I've already done what your trained warriors couldn't. I survived. More than that, I connected with it. I understand it. And right now, I'm the only one it trusts. He has a point, Dr. Vela spoke up. Her scientific curiosity had been running wild for the past 4 weeks, documenting every interaction between human and Kaarthax. The data we've gathered has completely changed our understanding of the species. The Kaarthax aren't solitary predators. They're colony creatures with complex social structures. This one became violent because it was alone and afraid. The debate continued for another hour. Finally, Ekatar proposed a compromise that made everyone uncomfortable, which usually meant it was fair. We'll give you a test, human. We'll open the main doors of the nest chamber. You'll walk the Kaarthax through the station to the transport bay. If you can do that without incident, without the creature attacking anyone, we'll approve your transport to Vex 9. But if it shows any aggression, any sign of violence, we'll destroy it immediately. And you'll go to prison for the rest of your life. Jake nodded slowly. Deal. The next morning, what felt like the entire station crowded into corridors near the nest chamber. Word had spread fast. Everyone wanted to see if the human could actually pull this off. Security teams positioned themselves at every intersection, weapons ready, evacuation routes planned. The massive doors began to open with a mechanical groan that echoed through the station. Jake stood in the opening and behind him, the Kaarthax stirred. The creature sensed the change, sensed the open space beyond. Its head lifted, mandibles clicking rapidly. The crowd collectively held its breath. Jake placed his hand on the Kaarthax's carapace, the gesture that had become familiar over the past weeks. Come on, he said softly. Let's go home. The Kaarthax stood, towering over Jake, its shadow covering him completely. For a moment, it just stood there and everyone watching thought this was where it would all go wrong. Then it took a step forward following Jake. They walked through Station Omega 7 together, a human in prison clothes and a creature that looked like it had crawled out of nightmares. Jake kept his hand on its armor the entire time, kept talking in that low, steady voice that had become his lifeline. You're doing great. Almost there. Just a little further. I know it's scary. All these people, all these new smells. But you're safe. I promise. The Kaarthax's head swiveled, taking in the crowds, the lights, the sounds. Its mandibles clicked nervously. But it never broke from Jake's side. Never showed aggression. It stayed pressed close to him like a child staying close to a parent in a scary situation. The walk to the transport bay took 15 minutes. It felt like hours. Hundreds of residents lined the corridors, watching in absolute silence. Some pressed recording devices, capturing footage that would spread across the galaxy. Others just stared, unable to believe what they were seeing. When they reached the transport ship, the Kaarthax stopped at the boarding ramp. Its claws scraped against the metal, hesitant. Jake didn't push. Didn't pull. He simply sat down on the ramp, his hand still touching the creature. I know, he said quietly. Another strange place. Another box. But this one's different. This one takes you home. To forests that are real. To others like you. To family. The Kaarthax made that soft clicking sound. The one Jake had come to recognize as contentment, as trust. It settled down beside him, its massive body pressing against his. They sat there for maybe 5 minutes,